Hey guys, so I'm on location out here somewhere in Middle Tennessee, of course coming to you from my second home here out of the back of my car, and I am testing out those two K&F Concept variable neutral density filters. I mentioned them in another video. I was actually surprised right out of the box because the cases are just so nice. I can't get over the cases, so good job there guys. So I've been out shooting here at this little waterfall today. I've put these up against my Breakthrough Photography 3-stop and 6-stop ND filter, as well as tested these out with my Breakthrough Photography polarizing filter. And if you know me at all, you know I essentially only use Breakthrough Photography filters because they are so good. So it's going to be very interesting to get these pictures into Lightroom and actually find out how good these K&F Concept variable ND filters really are. So let's get out of here. Alright, so now we are back in the relative warmth and comfort of my home here. So we can now discuss a little bit more about the particulars of these K&F Concept variable neutral density filters. Now before we move over to the computer and take a look at some of those images we made today with these filters, I want to drill down and talk a little bit more about the specifics of these K&F Concept variable neutral density filters. First things first, the construction of them actually pretty remarkable for how much they cost. They're made out of aluminum, they're not brass. If you are familiar with filters in photography, brass is usually ideal because it's something called anti-galling, an anti-galling metal. And all that means is that it's less likely to get stuck, brass is, over aluminum. That being said, the aluminum on these, very well made. They're variable, so you're probably not going to be stacking these, and more on that in just a second. But, so yeah, the aluminum doesn't bother me. They're fairly heavy, very well made, very sturdy, a lot of substance to them. And I have to say that the rings that control the variable density of them, very well done, very smooth. I don't feel like it's going to be coming apart. Now these both are coated with something that K&F Concept calls a nanotech layering system. I really don't know what that is, but it is supposed to be a multi-layer coating. That way it is beads water, it beads dust, it keeps your filters cleaner, easier to wipe off, and supposedly makes the front of the glass pretty hard and resistant to scratching. I was sent an ND 2 to 32 and an ND 8 to 128, which that translates, if you're like me, and I still have to look it up. The ND 2 to 32 is the same thing as a 1 to 5 stop, and the ND 8 to 128, roughly you could call that an ND 3, a 3 stop to roughly a 7 stop ND filter. So we're left with a 1 to 5 stop filter and a 3 to 7 stop filter, which the 7 stop, that's actually pretty dark. So we're going to see how that performs. And speaking of that, as I mentioned in the other video, I was specifically requested to test these out against my other filters that I use on a regular basis. And I'm a Breakthrough Photography guy, so I tested that out with my 3-stop ND filter and my 6-stop X4 ND filter from Breakthrough Photography, as well as I stacked it with the X4 CPL from Breakthrough Photography. That was tricky, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more later. So we should have a good comparison. Let's head over to the computer and see where the metal meets the meat with these filters from K&F Concept. What I have done here is brought all the images from today into Lightroom Classic CC, and I've took us into reference view. This picture that you're looking at right now is the baseline image. This was made without a filter. It was made with the Sigma 24mm f1.4 art lens on a Canon 5D Mark III, and I have done nothing to this picture other than adjust the exposure. The light was very fluid, the light kept changing here, so I've tried to normalize all these pictures, but I have not tampered with the color temperature, the contrast, the sharpness, anything that would skew the effects of the filters. None of that's been changed. For whatever reason, my camera was set in JPEG mode. I'm not exactly sure why that was, but, you know, sue me. It is what it is. But it was in the Canon standard JPEG, so really nothing was done there. And the white balance was set to cloudy. just in case you're wondering. And keep an eye right up here at the top left of each of these images here. This one over here is going to stay the same. This is our baseline, and you can keep track of the changes in exposure. I believe I kept everything at f16 across the board, but I'm not exactly sure about that. But if you're interested in the XF data, just look up here at the top left. Okay, let's get started here. I began with our lightest ND filter, and then I progressively moved from the lightest setting to the darkest setting, changed filters, and then did the same thing again, moved from light to dark. And then when we get down here, I will tell you exactly what I was doing there. In any case, this is our first image. This is with that ND2 to 32. So this is essentially an ND filter with a one-stop darkening effect. The sharpness, and I'm going to attempt to find a common ground here. The sharpness is extremely well done. Honestly, I can't really tell anything between any differences, that is, between the image without the filter on the lens and the image with the filter on the lens. So the sharpness is going to be okay, at least I think, for the time being. One thing that you will essentially notice is the color cast. This one on the right with the filter has a very warm color cast, orangish, kind of yellowy color cast. It's not displeasing, but you can definitely tell the difference between the baseline photo and the one with the filter. And I'm just going to move through the darkening effects of this filter. Some guy decided to drive through with his truck and fill up his cooler, which is completely fine, I guess. But even on the darkest setting of this first filter, get back to where we were, excellent sharpness. Very well done. This was at 1/30th of a second for our baseline. This was at 0.3 seconds. I'm sorry, I did actually change the aperture on that. That is at f11. Yeah, pretty impressive. Other than the color cast, that's pretty good. You can see a little bit of vignetting down here at the very bottom left as compared to the baseline. Not overly bad. This lens that I use, I love the Sigma 24mm, but wide open or towards the stop down, the smallest apertures that it could have, I think is f16, so we're at f11. You do get a little bit of vignetting. I can't say that that's totally exaggerated from the filter, but it is definitely there compared to our baseline. And speaking of that, I actually read something about these filters while I was doing this video, that the face of the filter was intentionally made larger than the rear of the filter. And I first noticed this because I realized that I can't actually stack these two filters on top of one another. Usually you can take a filter of the same size, screw them together, and stack the filters. You can't do that with these lenses. And the reason I figured that out was because when I was using it with my Breakthrough Photography circular polarizer, you can't put the polarizer on the front. You have to put the variable ND filter on the front of the polarizer, and that makes things a little bit tricky. It's tricky as it is because this is a variable ND and it has the rotating ring, and the polarizer has a rotating ring, so it gets a little complicated. Again, I'll talk about this more in just a second, but I think that is pretty cool that KNF Concept is essentially factoring in that vignetting effect and making the front of the filter wider than the actual thread of the lens. Kind of progressive. I haven't run into that before. So yeah, good on you, KNF Concepts, for essentially being progressive about confronting a problem that most filters tend to have. So we're moving on from the N2 to 32 to that ND8 to 128. So this is going to be our 3 to approximately 8 stop ND filter. This is the very first image compared to our baseline. You can't tell a lot of difference. I would almost hazard to say that this image here to the right with the filter is more contrasted to the one without the filter. I'm going to open up our development panel. You can see I haven't messed with the contrast or anything like that, so that may just be a inherent principle of this filter. and then moving right along progressively through those darkening settings of the filter, again, the sharpness stays the same, or if it's not the same, it's not off by much. Go in just a little bit more. Possibly loss of sharpness. That's actually hard to tell. That's very difficult. If anything, for not any practical purposes, I don't think we're losing any kind of sharpness there. The vignetting maybe is getting a little bit worse with this lens. Actually, yeah, you can see that. Look at the very top right here as we go through the settings. I'm going to go all the way back to that first image, and you can see that these trees individually get darker as we go compared to, get back in there, there we go, compared to our baseline image, especially on that very darkest setting here. And I want to point out that these filters on the ring of the filter, the actual housing of the filter, they have put in these dots, and that's something that's very convenient because each dot represents a different density of the filter. And I haven't saw this on another iteration of K&F Concepts variable neutral density filter. It's very helpful to know exactly, or at least approximately, what density of filter you're on in terms of stops. So that's very well done. Again, I appreciate that that foresight being put in by K&F Concepts. Now the next thing I did was stack these filters with a circular polarizer that I use quite often from Breakthrough Photography. It's one of the best circular polarizers I've ever encountered. And again, it was very weird using a variable neutral density filter and a circular polarizer, which is essentially a variable circular polarizer, with each other. Like I said, I had to put the polarizer onto the lens and then put the ND filter onto the polarizer, which normally I do vice versa with a non-variable ND filter. So you have two different rings moving together, and it was kind of, I don't know, it was cumbersome. K&F Concepts does actually offer a combined circular polarizer with the ND filter, and if you wanted to go for one filter, I would recommend that you do that instead of trying to combine a circular polarizer with a variable ND filter. So just food for thought there. But overall, it did fine. You don't see any of that Xing. This one actually looks really nice. That was the darkest setting of the darkest ND filter that I had. Again, that the warming effect actually worked in my favor here. It's a beautiful image, if I can say so myself, especially right out of camera for a JPEG. So with a stacked variable ND filter and a stacked circular polarizer filter, not too bad considering our baseline here. And that was a 15-second exposure at f16. Yeah, so it's pretty good. Consider these filters are quote-unquote budget filters. Okay, so last but not least, I did make a couple of images with my tried and true Breakthrough Photography 3-stop and my tried and true Breakthrough Photography 6-stop filter. These are not variable. These are just, they are what they are. They're a 3-stop neutral density filter and a 6-stop neutral density filter. And right off the bat, you can notice that there is no color cast with these. This was the 3-stop. This was the 6-stop. And even though there's no color cast, the sharpness, of course, is extraordinary, as all Breakthrough Photography filters that I've had any experience with are. But other than overall that color cast, there's not a whole lot of difference in them. And I have to say that for the price, if you are budget conscious and if you are shooting essentially non-professionally, you don't need the best of the absolute best, these K&F Concept filters, fairly competitive. They are attractive in terms of the sharpness, the contrast, and if you can deal with the color cast, I have to say, not too bad at all. In short, Yeah, I'm impressed. I have to say I wasn't expecting this level of quality over what amounts to a $60 to $65 filter, depending on which darkness you choose, for something that essentially would take the place of 3 to 4 filters in your camera bag. Number one, the sharpness is something that I really was impressed with. I didn't see that much of a loss of sharpness, even when we stacked it with that Breakthrough Photography circular polarizing filter. As you know, the more glass you put in between your scene and the camera sensor, the more apt you are to lose sharpness. And that was something that I was really glad I didn't see going on as much as I thought I would with these K&F concept filters. There wasn't a lot of vignetting. I have read other reviews of these filters saying that there was some vignetting going on. I was actually testing this on my Sigma 24-1.4 Art lens, which actually at 1.4 can get a little dark in the corners, but I didn't see anything being exaggerated just for the filters. Another thing that I read about some of these filters in the reviews is that you get that Xing that you can get in some lower quality variable ND filters. I didn't see that in my test, but who knows? I'm not saying that they're lying, but I didn't experience any of that Xing in my test with these filters. One of the biggest things I did notice though was that yellowish orange warm color cast. I really don't think that would bother me that much because it's easily remedied in post-processing. But there again, it is there. That color cast is there with these filters, at least in my test. That's not something that I would say you would definitely experience with yours, but when you compare it to my Breakthrough Photography filters, no color cast, so there's something to be said there. So yeah, all in all guys, no joke, I'm thoroughly impressed with these two filters from K&F Concept. I mentioned in another video, it's a company that I've had a long history with, and it seems like their products are getting gradually better and better. And there's something to be said for that. I'm glad any company tries to improve and get a better product out there to you and I. So if you think you might enjoy these K&F Concept filters, please check down in the description because I have a 10% coupon code just for me from K&F Concept if you order them from Amazon. I'm thinking that's until December 20th, 2019. So head over, check them out. If you think it's something you like, now would probably be the time to buy them. All right, everybody, that is going to do it for me. Thank you so much for joining me here, and thank you very much to all my new subscribers. I have noticed that the subscriber list is steadily growing, so I really appreciate that. Thanks for being here. Thanks for sharing the videos. Thanks for liking the videos and commenting. If you got anything out of this one, why not? Share it, like it, subscribe if you aren't already. So, yeah, you don't have to say that. But anyway, thanks a lot for being here, everybody, and I'll see you next time.